Sometimes the smallest seat in the room holds the story that changes your life forever. If you enjoy stories that heal the heart, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the rest. The cafeteria of Greenwood Elementary was alive with the usual midday chaos. Trays clattering, the hum of hundreds of voices ricocheting off painted cinder block walls, the faint smell of reheated pizza competing with the sharper scent of disinfectant. In the far left corner, where the light from the high windows dimmed into shadow, sat a little girl alone. Lily Anderson, 5 years old, her feet too short to touch the floor, balanced a paper napkin in her lap. On it sat a plain slice of bread. No peanut butter, no jelly, and a plastic cup half filled with water from the drinking fountain. Her big brown eyes followed the other kids in the lunch line, each clutching a tray that overflowed with choices: cartons of chocolate milk, apple slices, warm pasta. She said nothing, but the slight fold of her shoulders told the story before her mouth could. 2 boys at a nearby table noticed her. "Hey, bread girl," one called, his voice pitched to carry above the cafeteria din. "What's for dessert, more bread?" His friend snorted, bits of macaroni spraying from his grin. Lily looked down. She'd learned early that silence was sometimes safer than replying. Her mother, Megan, had always told her, "We'll have better days, honey. Just not today." Daniel Cole had not planned on noticing her. The 42-year-old CEO of Cole Capital Group was there for a quick, polite appearance. Greenwood Elementary was one of the schools benefiting from a technology grant his company had provided the previous year. His assistant had suggested the visit would make for great community outreach, and Daniel, who spent most of his days in glass conference rooms overlooking Elliott Bay, had agreed. The principal, a brisk woman named Carol Jenkins, had been guiding him down the central aisle of the cafeteria, proudly pointing out new tablets at the library table and a freshly painted mural on the wall. Daniel nodded politely, the kind of nod that said he was listening while already half thinking of the next meeting. Then he saw her. It wasn't the bread. It wasn't the water. It was the way she sat, still, small, self-contained in a world that seemed determined to overlook her. The noise of the cafeteria faded in his mind, replaced by the echo of something from long ago, a memory he couldn't quite name, but that stirred a tug in his chest. He slowed. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, "mind if I grab lunch here instead of in the conference room?" She looked startled. "Oh, of course. We can get you a plate." "I'll take whatever they're having." He gestured toward the lunch line. "I'll find a seat." He picked up a tray, accepted a spoonful of pasta, a carton of milk, and an apple. When he turned, the nearest open spot wasn't near the principal's table or the group of teachers. It was at the corner table across from the little girl with bread and water. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. She blinked at him. "It's a free seat." Her voice was quiet but not timid, just measured. Daniel sat. "Name's Daniel." "Lily," she replied, eyes still on her bread. He took a bite of pasta, made a face as though it were the most exotic thing he'd ever tasted, and said, "You know, when I was your age, I once brought a lunch so bad my friends still talk about it. Cold lima beans. No salt. My mom swore it was character building." A flicker, just the smallest curve, appeared at the corner of her mouth. "Did you eat it?" she asked. "Every bean," he said solemnly, "because I didn't have your brilliant idea to just bring bread." The curve widened. "It's not an idea. It's what we have." Her honesty caught him off guard. No self-pity, no apology, just a statement of fact. He found himself wanting to know why. Before he could ask, one of the boys from earlier sauntered past, tossing a crumpled milk carton onto Lily's table. "For your bread," he sneered. Daniel's hand moved faster than his thoughts. He picked up the carton, handed it back to the boy, and said in a voice calm but unyielding, "Tables are for eating, not littering. Take it back." The boy flushed, mumbled something, and retreated. Lily watched him with something like wonder. "They don't usually stop." "Then maybe they've been sitting at the wrong tables," Daniel said. For the rest of the lunch period, he stayed there, telling her harmless stories about slipping in mud puddles and getting chased by a neighbor's goose. She laughed, quietly at first, then freely enough that a few nearby kids glanced over. When the bell rang, she gathered her bread crusts and water cup, gave him a small nod, and disappeared into the stream of students. Daniel remained at the table, staring at the spot where she'd sat. He had met countless people in his life, partners, investors, rivals, but something about this small girl with bread and water felt different. Like a thread had been tossed between them, invisible but unbreakable, and if he followed it, it might just lead somewhere he hadn't expected to go. Daniel Cole had spent most of his adult life wearing blue suits. In the finance world, blue meant steadiness, trust, and a certain brand of authority that made investors lean forward and listen. But that morning at Greenwood Elementary, as he crossed the parking lot toward his car, Daniel realized the suit had done something unusual. It had made a child notice him. He could still see her, sitting at that far corner table, Lily Anderson, with her quiet poise, her bread and water, her unflinching honesty. Most children her age fidgeted, played with their food, glanced around for friends. Lily had been entirely still, almost as if she knew that stillness was the best way to go unseen. Yet she had seen him. And more than that, she had let him see her. Back in his downtown office, the floor-to-ceiling windows of Cole Capital Group framed the sweep of Elliott Bay in winter. The sky was low and gray, a shade that matched his mood. His assistant, Claire, set a stack of reports on his desk. "You're back early," she said. "Everything all right at Greenwood?" "Fine," he replied, loosening his tie. "Better than fine." She tilted her head, curious, but Daniel didn't elaborate. Not yet. He found himself distracted all afternoon, his attention sliding away from market summaries and quarterly projections. The memory of Lily's small hands holding that bread was persistent, almost intrusive. He tried to tell himself it was just empathy, the kind any decent person would feel. But there was something sharper beneath it, an echo of his own childhood in Spokane, before his father's business had taken off. He remembered nights when dinner had been canned soup, and mornings when milk had been stretched with water to last the week. The difference was that Daniel's poverty had been temporary, a storm they'd weathered. Lily's, he suspected, was not. 2 days later, Daniel's car turned into the narrow streets of Ballard, where the air smelled faintly of salt water and roasted coffee beans from a corner cafe. He'd told Claire he was running a quick personal errand. What he didn't say was that he'd called the principal at Greenwood and asked for a little background. Not much, just enough to learn where Lily lived. He parked near a row of weathered apartment buildings. Their paint was faded, their balconies cluttered with laundry racks and plastic chairs. A playground with 2 rusted swings stood at the center of the courtyard. Children's laughter rang out, though the air was cold enough to sting. He spotted her at once, Lily, in a yellow coat a size too big, sitting at the bottom of the slide with a spiral notebook in her lap. She wasn't playing. She was writing. Daniel walked over slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Hey," he said. She looked up, surprised. "You're the man from lunch." "That's me." He smiled. "And you're the girl who beat me at the quiet game without even knowing we were playing." Her mouth curved, but she didn't put the notebook away. "Mind if I ask what you're writing?" "It's not writing, it's numbers." She tilted the notebook toward him. Rows of digits and tiny calculations filled the page, neat and deliberate. Daniel studied them. "Multiplication?" "And division," she said matter-of-factly. Mom says it's good practice. I like making the numbers balance. Before he could ask more, the apartment door behind them opened. A woman stepped out, her dark hair pulled into a tired knot, her face flushed from the warmth inside. She was wearing scrubs, blue with the faded logo of a clinic near Pike Place Market stitched on the chest. "Lily!" she called. "You forgot your scarf!" She stopped when she saw Daniel, her gaze sharpened, protective. "I'm Daniel Cole," he said quickly, straightening. I met Lily at school this week. I just wanted to say hello." Megan Anderson's expression softened, but only slightly. "You're the man in the suit." "Guilty." She came closer, tucking the scarf around Lily's neck. "I appreciate you sitting with her. She doesn't connect easily with new people." "I'm honored she made an exception," Daniel said. "Do you mind if I ask, do you work at the clinic full-time?" "2 part-time jobs," Megan replied, adjusting her coat as though bracing against more than just the wind. "The clinic in the mornings, then the night shift at a nursing home in Northgate. It's not ideal, but it keeps the rent paid." Daniel hesitated. "And you studied nursing?" Her eyes flickered with something, pride maybe, or regret. "Almost finished my degree. Had to stop when Lily was born." He nodded, understanding more than he let on. "Well, if you ever want to finish, sometimes opportunities come from places you least expect." Megan's polite smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "In my experience, opportunities don't usually knock on apartment doors in Ballard." Daniel could have argued, but something told him to leave the thought for later. Instead, he knelt beside Lily. "Keep working on those numbers. You might surprise people one day." "I already do," she said seriously, then returned to her notebook. That night, Daniel found himself walking past his study and stopping at the shelf where he kept a photograph few people had ever seen. It was of his younger half-sister, Rachel, taken at a summer picnic years ago. She was wearing a yellow dress, her hair caught mid-laugh by the wind. They hadn't been close. Different mothers, different worlds, but her sudden passing had left a hollow place in the family. And for a reason he couldn't yet name, when he'd seen Lily's coat at the playground, the memory of that dress had come back to him. The next morning, Claire caught him before his first meeting. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Something on your mind?" Daniel glanced out the window, toward the horizon beyond the ferries and cranes. "Just thinking about a girl I met at a corner table, and wondering how many corners like that exist in this city." Claire studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Maybe you should sit at more of them." Daniel thought he just might. The rain came early that Thursday morning, soft at first, then steady, tapping against the high windows of Daniel Cole's office. Seattle in February had a way of making time feel suspended. Gray skies blurring into the silver water, the hum of traffic muted by damp air. Daniel stood at his window, coffee cooling in his hand, thinking not of stock indexes or acquisition meetings, but of a yellow dress from years ago. It was the same shade as the coat Lily had been wearing in the playground. Rachel had been 17 that summer, and Daniel 26. Their father had brought her to the annual company picnic at Golden Gardens Park, her first time meeting many of the extended family. She had arrived in a pale yellow sundress, hair loose, laughing too hard at a joke from someone she barely knew. That day, she'd seemed untouchable, bright, quick, endlessly curious. But 2 years later, she was gone, the victim of a car accident on a slick stretch of I-90. The loss had left the family fractured in quiet ways no one liked to talk about. And now, 10 years later, Daniel couldn't shake the thought that Lily's eyes carried something of Rachel's spark. Though dulled by a childhood far rougher than his sister had ever known, he had to know more. Daniel called Claire into his office. "I need you to pull any public records on a Megan Anderson. Lives in Ballard, works part-time at Pike Place Clinic and a nursing home in Northgate. She has a daughter named Lily, about 5 years old. Claire's brows rose. This personal or professional? Both, he said, surprising himself. But keep it quiet. 2 hours later, she returned with a thin manila folder. Not much beyond what you already know. Megan Harper. Anderson's her married name. Divorced, no remarriage. She was enrolled in the nursing program at UW but withdrew in her final semester. No criminal record, no debt beyond student loans. One sibling listed, Rachel Cole. Daniel's pulse thudded once in his ears. Rachel Cole? Same spelling as yours, Claire said. And same father. For a long moment, Daniel couldn't speak. The rain's steady patter seemed louder. So, Lily's your niece, Claire finished quietly. That evening, Daniel drove to Northgate. The nursing home where Megan worked was a low brick building softened by evergreen hedges and a mural of Mount Rainier on the side wall. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm soup. Residents in wheelchairs lined the hallway, some watching a television game show, others dozing under knitted blankets. He found Megan at the far end, adjusting a resident's oxygen tubing. Her movements were efficient, but gentle, and when the man coughed, she touched his shoulder with a quiet reassurance that seemed to calm him instantly. When she noticed Daniel, her brow furrowed. Mr. Cole, what are you doing here? I needed to talk to you, he said. It's important. She excused herself from the resident's room, leading him into the small staff lounge. I hope this isn't about charity. I don't take handouts. It's not charity, Daniel said. He took a breath. It's family. Her eyes narrowed. Meaning? I know about Rachel. His voice softened on the name. She was my sister, which means Lily is my niece. Megan's posture stiffened. Rachel never mentioned you. That doesn't surprise me, Daniel admitted. We weren't close. Different mothers, different childhoods. But I cared about her. And I didn't know she had a daughter. She didn't, Megan said flatly. Rachel died before Lily was born. Daniel's mind worked quickly. Then, Megan sighed. Rachel was my best friend. When she died, her parents, your father and stepmother, didn't want anything to do with the baby I was carrying. They called it a mistake. Her voice hardened. So I left. I took my mother's maiden name, raised Lily alone. No family, no help. Daniel felt heat in his chest. Not anger at Megan, but at the coldness he recognized all too well in his father's brand of legacy preservation. If I had known, you didn't, she cut in. And I don't expect anything now. But he could see the exhaustion around her eyes, the way her shoulders held the weight of too many double shifts, too many nights alone in a small apartment with bills stacked on the counter. Later that week, Daniel returned to Ballard. Lily was in the courtyard again, but this time she wasn't alone. A few neighborhood kids were playing tag, their laughter ringing off the brick walls. Lily stayed on the fringe, tracing chalk shapes on the pavement. A sun, a row of flowers, a tall figure with dark hair in a blue suit. That me? Daniel asked, pointing at the drawing. She smiled without looking up. Maybe. Tall, handsome, mysterious, he teased. Tall, yes. Handsome, I don't know. Mysterious. Definitely. He crouched beside her. You're good at this. Ever thought of drawing on something bigger than a sidewalk? Like what? I don't know, maybe a real canvas, paint, brushes? Her eyes lit briefly, then dimmed. Paint costs money. Daniel's throat tightened. What if someone gave it to you? She studied him, as if weighing whether to accept an offer not yet spoken aloud. Then I'd paint the biggest sun you've ever seen. That night, Daniel sat in his apartment overlooking the bay, the yellow streetlights reflecting in the dark water. The folder with Megan's and Lily's names lay open on the coffee table. He thought of Rachel, how she had bridged worlds so easily, how she might have raised a daughter with the same mix of fire and kindness. And he thought of Lily, living just miles away, yet in a completely different universe from his own. Family, he decided, wasn't only about who you grew up with. Sometimes it was about who you refused to leave behind. The Monday morning boardroom smelled faintly of espresso and rain-wet wool. Cole Capital Group's senior executives filed in, carrying leather portfolios and the kind of brisk energy that came from closing multi-million-dollar deals before breakfast. Daniel Cole sat at the head of the long walnut table, flipping through a set of quarterly reports that had suddenly lost their urgency in his mind. As the others settled, he made the kind of announcement that turned heads. "We're creating a new position," he said. "Medical Services Coordinator, someone who can oversee on-site health screenings, employee wellness programs, and coordinate with local clinics for community outreach." The COO, a compact man with wire-rimmed glasses, raised an eyebrow. "Is this part of the corporate social responsibility expansion?" "Yes," Daniel replied, "and it's overdue. Too many people delay basic care because they can't afford the time or cost. We have the resources to bridge that gap, not just for our employees, but for their families." Murmurs circled the table. A few executives nodded. Others exchanged skeptical glances, wondering where this was coming from. "And," Daniel continued, "the role should be filled by someone who understands both the clinical side and the reality of working families. Someone with nursing training, preferably local connections." Claire, seated 2 spots down, knew exactly where this was headed. She caught Daniel's eye for a brief second, a flicker of both surprise and approval passing between them. That afternoon, in a quiet corner of his office, Daniel composed an email. To Megan Anderson. Subject: Opportunity. Dear Ms. Anderson, last week we spoke briefly about finishing your nursing degree. I believe we have an opportunity that might interest you. A medical services coordinator position at Cole Capital Group. The role is part-time with benefits, designed to allow flexibility for further study if desired. If you'd like to discuss, I can meet you at the Ballard Coffee Roasters this Thursday at 10 a.m. Regards, Daniel Cole. He read it twice before sending, resisting the urge to add anything that might sound like pity. He knew Megan's pride was not something to trifle with. Thursday arrived with a clear, cold sky over Seattle. Ballard Coffee Roasters smelled of freshly ground beans and warm pastries. Daniel arrived early, taking a table near the window. The sun caught in the steam rising from his mug, reminding him of winter mornings as a boy, before his father's fortune, when coffee had been the only heat in the kitchen. Megan walked in 10 minutes later, her navy peacoat buttoned to the chin. She scanned the room, spotted him, and approached with a cautious expression. "You didn't have to come all the way to Ballard," she said as she sat. "I wanted to," Daniel replied, "and I wanted this to feel neutral. Not like a summons to a glass tower." She smiled faintly at that, removing her gloves. "So, what's this opportunity?" He explained the role, its responsibilities, the pay, the benefits, how it could be a bridge back to finishing her degree if she chose. Megan listened without interrupting, her gaze steady. "Why me?" she asked finally. "Because you have the right training," he said. "Because you know how to talk to people who might otherwise be overlooked. And because—" he hesitated, then chose honesty. "Because you matter to someone who matters to me." Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed measured. "And what do you get out of this?" "Better care for my employees, A chance to keep a promise I should have made years ago. Megan studied him for a long moment. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. That evening, Daniel sat in his apartment, sketching ideas for something he'd been thinking about since that day in the schoolyard. Not a grand foundation or a gala fundraiser. He'd done those before, and they'd always felt like performance. This was simpler. A quiet, anonymous fund to cover lunch debts at Greenwood Elementary. No press releases, no plaques, just every child able to pick up a tray without worrying about what was in their pocket. He called the principal the next morning. I'd like to cover the lunch program for the next 3 years. All students, no names attached. Carol Jenkins was stunned. Mr. Cole, that's incredibly generous. The families, they don't need to know it's me, Daniel said. They just need to know their kids can eat. A week later, he returned to Greenwood. This time, the cafeteria felt different. The noise was the same, but there was a looseness to it. Laughter unpinched by hunger. Lily sat with a small group of girls, a carton of milk and a turkey sandwich in front of her. She was talking, hands moving as she described something, probably one of her chalk drawings. When she noticed Daniel at the doorway, she gave a small wave. It wasn't shy this time. It was the kind of wave you give someone you expect to see again. He walked over. Mind if I join you? One of the other girls giggled. You're the guy in the blue suit. Guilty, Daniel said, sitting down. And I hear the food's better this week. Lily shrugged, but there was a smile tugging at her mouth. I guess. He leaned closer. Guess we'll have to thank whoever's responsible. She tilted her head, studying him with that same measured gaze her mother had. Maybe we already did. That night, Megan called. I'll take the job, she said simply. But on one condition. You treat me like you would any other hire. No special favors. Agreed, Daniel said. And he meant it. Invisible threads, he thought after hanging up, had a way of weaving themselves into patterns you didn't see until you stepped back. And by then, you couldn't imagine the fabric without them. The first Saturday of March arrived bright and clear, the kind of Seattle morning that felt like a promise of spring, even if the air was still cold enough to see your breath. Daniel Cole wasn't in his usual suit. He wore a dark sweater over a white shirt, sleeves pushed to his elbows, and for once, he wasn't heading into the office. Instead, he was standing in front of a modest 2-story apartment complex in Northgate, holding a paper bag from a local bakery. The scent of fresh cinnamon rolls drifted up through the bag, mingling with the smell of damp cedar from the rain the night before. He rang the doorbell. Footsteps padded across the floor, then the door opened to reveal Lily Anderson in a sweatshirt that seemed a size too big, her hair mussed from sleep. She blinked up at him. Hi, she said, voice still scratchy with morning. Hi yourself, Daniel replied. I brought breakfast. Is your mom home? Lily stepped back to let him in. She's making coffee. The apartment was small but tidy. Second-hand furniture, a bookshelf stuffed with paperbacks, a few bright throw pillows that seemed chosen to warm the otherwise neutral space. On the kitchen counter, a vase held 3 sunflowers, slightly drooping but still bright against the gray morning light. Megan appeared from the kitchen, mug in hand, wearing jeans and a faded UW sweatshirt. Her hair was pulled back, but a few loose strands framed her face. Mr. Cole, she said, surprised. This is unexpected. Daniel, he corrected gently. And I thought since it's Saturday we could have coffee somewhere that doesn't serve it in a paper cup. Her brow lifted. You mean here? Unless you'd rather go out. He lifted the bakery bag. I come bearing bribes. Lily peeked into the bag and let out a delighted gasp. Cinnamon rolls. That's my vote, Daniel said. They ate at the small kitchen table, the sunlight slanting across the worn wood. Lily chattered between bites about her latest math workbook, a story about a classmate's pet turtle, and how she'd drawn a chalk mural on the playground wall before the rain washed it away. Megan listened, smiling, but Daniel could tell she was also watching him, measuring, perhaps, whether this was just politeness or something more. When the plates were cleared, Lily asked, "Can I show you my drawings?" "Absolutely," Daniel said. She darted into her room and returned with a folder bulging with paper. As she spread them out, Daniel recognized some of the images she'd once drawn in chalk. A sun with long curling rays, a house with a crooked chimney, a figure in a blue suit waving. "This one's my favorite," she said, pointing to a bright yellow flower. "Sunflower?" Daniel asked. She nodded. "Mom says they always turn toward the light." While Lily ran off to wash the sugar from her hands, Megan began stacking the drawings into a neat pile. Daniel noticed a small picture frame tucked against the wall on the sideboard, a photograph he hadn't seen before. He rose, drawn to it before he could think better of it. The photo was of a young woman in her 20s, hair caught mid-motion by the wind, laughing. She wore a pale yellow dress, the hem brushing her knees. "Rachel." Daniel's throat tightened. Megan's voice was softer now. "It was taken the summer before she died. We went to Alki Beach that day. She made me promise to print it, not just leave it on my phone." Daniel traced the edge of the frame with his fingertips. "She looks exactly how I remember. Maybe even happier." "She was," Megan said. "That day, at least." He set the photo back carefully. "Lily doesn't know?" "She knows Rachel was important to me," Megan said, "but she doesn't know about you, about family ties. I wasn't sure it mattered if you weren't going to be part of her life." Daniel met her gaze, steady. "It matters. To me, it matters." Later, when Lily returned, Daniel asked, "How about we make a deal?" "What kind of deal?" "I'll bring you more paper, paints, and brushes, real artist supplies. In return, you'll paint me something." "What do you want me to paint?" "A sunflower," he said, glancing at the vase on the counter. "The biggest one you can." Her eyes lit up. "Deal." By early afternoon, Daniel said his goodbyes, promising to return with the supplies. The drive back to his condo was quiet, save for the low hum of the engine and the weight of the photograph still fresh in his mind. Rachel had been a rare presence in his life, sometimes like a comet, bright and fleeting, sometimes like a shadow he couldn't quite reach. He'd thought the connection had died with her, but here it was, alive in the laughter of a 5-year-old girl and the determined grace of the woman raising her. He realized then that helping Megan find stable work and giving Lily a fuller childhood wasn't just generosity. It was, in some way, restitution for the years their family had turned away. And maybe, if he did this right, it could be the beginning of something entirely new. The first shipment arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, a large cardboard box left at the front desk of Greenwood Elementary, addressed simply to Art Room. Inside, wrapped in brown paper and layers of tissue, were thick pads of watercolor paper, jars of tempera paint in every color of the rainbow, a set of fine-tipped brushes, and even a collapsible easel sized for a child. There was no card, no signature, just a small sticker on the underside of the box, a sunflower. When the supplies were unpacked, Lily Anderson stood by the doorway, hugging her backpack, eyes wide. She didn't have to ask where it came from. She'd seen the same sunflower sticker once before, on the bakery bag Daniel had brought that Saturday morning. Daniel hadn't told anyone at the school it was from him, not even Principal Jenkins. He preferred it that way. He'd learned that the best gifts were the ones that left no debt to repay. He was, however, showing up at the school more often. Sometimes it was officially, reviewing progress on the tech grant in the library, discussing playground repairs with the facilities team. But other times it was simply to sit in the cafeteria for lunch or to read aloud to a group of second graders in the library corner. It didn't take long for the staff to notice the change. "You're becoming a regular here," one of the teachers teased one afternoon as he helped stack chairs after an art class. "Best boardroom in the city," Daniel replied with a grin. One Thursday, after reading Charlotte's Web to Lily's class, he walked her to the art room. "I think you're going to like what's in here," he said. The smell of fresh paper and tempera paint met them at the door. Lily's eyes went straight to the easel, the rainbow of paint jars, the soft brushes in their cup. She turned to him slowly. "Was this you?" Daniel gave a slight shrug. "Maybe, maybe not." Lily smiled in that way children do when they know the truth but agree to play along. "I'm painting your sunflower first." Over the next few weeks, their interactions found a rhythm. Daniel would stop by once or twice a week, sometimes joining her at lunch, other times bringing along a new book or set of colored pencils. He never made it a spectacle. He didn't want Lily to feel like she was a cause. He wanted her to feel normal. One day in mid-March, he found her in the art room, working intently on a painting. The canvas was nearly as tall as she was, covered in broad strokes of gold and yellow. The petals radiated outward, each tipped with a faint trace of orange, and the center was a rich brown speckled with tiny flecks of black. "It's beautiful," he said, stepping closer. She tilted her head, appraising her work. "It's not done. The sunflower needs the sky behind it. Big sky. Mom says flowers need sky." Daniel swallowed, unexpectedly moved. "Your mom is right." By April, the school began holding small community afternoons where parents could visit and join in activities. On one such day, Daniel arrived to find Megan in the library, reading aloud to a small circle of children. She was animated, her voice rising and falling with the rhythm of the story. For a moment, Daniel simply watched from the doorway, struck by the ease in her expression, so different from the guarded woman he'd met in the nursing home lounge. After the reading, they stepped into the hallway. "You're good at that," he said. "It's easy when they actually listen," she replied with a smile. "I'd like to see you do more of it," he said. "Not just here, maybe in the new role at Cole Capital. We could set up a monthly health and reading session for employees' kids." Megan shook her head slightly, amused. "You're always building something." "Maybe," Daniel admitted, "but only when it's worth building." Spring break arrived with a rare stretch of sun. On the first Monday back, Lily surprised him. She found him in the cafeteria, tugged gently at his sleeve, and handed him a large envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of watercolor paper. When he opened it, he saw the sunflower, finished now, framed by a brilliant expanse of blue sky. "It's for you," she said, "because you bring light." Daniel felt the weight of the words settle deep in his chest. For a man who had spent years believing his worth was measured in contracts and capital gains, the idea that light could be given, or received, was something entirely new. He crouched to meet her gaze. "Then I'll keep trying to deserve it." The forecast had warned of high winds and sudden rain showers. But on that Thursday morning in late April, Greenwood Elementary's playground was bright with sunlight. The air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass from the field beyond the basketball courts, and the shrieks of children playing tag carried across the schoolyard. Daniel Cole had come by on his lunch break, telling himself it was to drop off a new box of sketching pencils for the art room. But in truth, he'd found himself steering his car toward the school without really deciding to. It was becoming a habit, a pull he didn't entirely understand but no longer questioned. He spotted Lily Anderson immediately. She was on the far side of the playground, balanced on the low edge of a raised flower bed, arms outstretched as if walking a tightrope. Her yellow jacket, a smaller, lighter version of the winter coat he'd first seen her in, caught the sunlight. "Careful," Megan had told him more than once. "Lily has no fear of heights or speed." Daniel smiled to himself, watching her leap from the edge to the ground, landing with the kind of careless grace only children possess. The first gust of wind hit while he was halfway across the yard. It came sharp and sudden, scattering a cluster of jump ropes and sending a chorus of squeals through the air. Dark clouds rolled over the sun with a swiftness that seemed almost theatrical. Daniel quickened his pace. He had just reached the row of swings when he heard the sharp, panicked cry. It was Lily. She'd been climbing the metal ladder to the slide when the second gust hit, harder this time. The ladder was slick from an earlier drizzle, and her sneakers slipped on the rung. In an instant, she was tumbling sideways. Daniel's heart kicked into overdrive. He closed the distance in seconds, catching her under the arms just before her head could hit the packed gravel below. The impact jarred his shoulders, but he tightened his grip, holding her steady against his chest. "Got you," he said, his voice low but firm. "I've got you." Her hands clung to the front of his sweater, small and trembling. For a moment she didn't speak, just buried her face against him. The recess monitor hurried over, her whistle swinging wildly from its lanyard. "She okay?" "I think so," Daniel said, crouching to look Lily in the eye. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but her lip quivered. "Just scared." "Nothing wrong with that," he said. "Brave doesn't mean never being scared." The monitor suggested taking her to the nurse's office, but Daniel was already carrying her toward the building, one arm supporting her back, the other under her knees. By the time they reached the main hallway, Lily's grip had loosened, though she didn't let go entirely. The nurse's office smelled faintly of antiseptic and lemon-scented cleaner. Daniel set Lily gently on the padded bench, crouching beside her while the nurse checked her over. No scrapes beyond a faint red mark on her palm. No swelling, no signs of concussion. "You're lucky," the nurse said kindly. "Just a little shaken up." "I'm fine now," Lily insisted, though her voice was still small. Daniel glanced at his watch, then at the nurse. "Mind if I stay with her until her mom gets here?" The nurse nodded. "Go ahead." "I'll call her." Megan arrived less than 15 minutes later, her cheeks flushed from the brisk walk across the parking lot. She was still in her navy scrubs, hair pulled back in a neat twist, but her eyes were sharp with concern. "What happened?" she asked, kneeling beside Lily. "Wind caught her on the ladder to the slide," Daniel said. "She slipped. I caught her before she hit the ground." Megan exhaled slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Thank you." "Anytime," Daniel said, and he meant it. When the nurse cleared Lily to go back to class, Megan hesitated. "Would it be completely breaking the rules if I stole her away for an early lunch?" Daniel smiled. "If it's breaking the rules, I'll take the blame." The three of them ended up at a small cafe a few blocks from the school, the kind of place with mismatched mugs and a chalkboard menu. Lily sat between them, dunking grilled cheese triangles into tomato soup. Her laughter returned slowly, like sunlight pushing through clouds. At one point, she glanced at Daniel and said, "Thanks for catching me." He reached across the table, tapping the rim of her mug. "That's what family's for." Back at the apartment later that evening, Megan poured 2 cups of tea while Lily colored at the kitchen table. The quiet between them wasn't awkward anymore. It had settled into something comfortable, like the pause between verses in a song. "You didn't have to stay with her all that time," Megan said finally. "Yes, I did," Daniel replied. "And I'll keep doing it, as long as you'll let me." Her gaze lingered on him for a long moment, then softened. "Then maybe you should come by for dinner sometime. A real one. No cinnamon rolls." "I'd like that," he said, and the warmth in his voice was unmistakable. October in Seattle had its own kind of magic. The air held a crispness that hinted at winter. Yet the trees along Woodland Park still clung to their fiery leaves, reds, oranges, and golds swirling underfoot with every gust of wind off Green Lake. The sky was an almost impossible blue, the kind that made you notice the distance between the clouds. Daniel Cole had suggested the walk earlier in the week, half expecting Megan to politely decline. To his surprise, she'd agreed. And now here they were, the three of them, Megan in a long caramel-colored coat, Lily in a knitted hat with a pom-pom bouncing as she skipped ahead, and Daniel in a dark wool jacket, following the winding path through the park. Lily darted from tree to tree, collecting leaves she deemed good enough for her art folder. Daniel watched her with a mix of quiet amusement and something deeper, an awareness that moments like these were rare for him. For most of his adult life, his weekends had been filled with investor calls, travel schedules, and the constant background hum of deals to be closed. This was different. Slower. Better. About halfway around the lake, Lily ran ahead toward a bench overlooking the water. She plopped down, spreading her leaf collection on the worn wood, arranging them from smallest to largest. Megan sat beside her, brushing a stray hair from her face. "You're going to run out of room," she said. "Then I'll use the table at home," Lily replied matter-of-factly. Daniel stayed standing for a moment, looking out over the lake. A family of ducks drifted past, their ripples catching the sunlight. He took a breath, steadying himself. What he was about to say wasn't casual. He sat down on Lily's other side. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice gentler than usual. Lily glanced up from her leaves. "Is it bad news?" "No," Daniel said quickly. It's important news. About family." Her eyes narrowed in curiosity. He looked to Megan, who gave a small nod, permission and warning all at once. Daniel took another breath. "Do you remember the picture in your house? The woman in the yellow dress?" "Mom's friend Rachel," Lily said. "She was more than my friend," Megan said softly. "She was Daniel's sister." Lily's gaze bounced between them. "So, you're related?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Rachel was my half-sister, which makes me your uncle." The words hung there for a moment, the only sound the wind moving through the leaves above them. Lily's brow furrowed as she processed this. "If you're family," she said slowly, "why didn't I know before?" Daniel hesitated. "Because I didn't know you existed. And once I did, I wanted to be sure that if I came into your life, I stayed." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "If you're family, are you going to leave like other people?" The question hit harder than he expected. He thought of the father who had measured love in usefulness, the business partners who disappeared when a deal soured, the relationships he'd let drift away because work had seemed more important. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." Lily studied his face, as if testing the strength of his words. Then, after a moment, she picked up the largest leaf from her collection and pressed it into his hand. "You can keep this, so you remember." They continued walking. The air filled with the rustle of leaves underfoot. Daniel and Megan fell into step behind Lily, who was now balancing along the edge of the path again. "You handled that well," Megan said quietly. "She's braver than I expected," Daniel replied. "Lily's had to be," Megan said. "You don't get to be a fragile kid when the world expects you to be tough." Daniel glanced at her. "And you? When was the last time you got to be fragile?" Megan's smile was small but real. "That's not in my job description." They walked in silence for a while. Eventually, Lily stopped to feed a few of her smaller leaves into the lake, watching them drift like tiny boats. As they neared the park exit, a sudden gust sent a swirl of leaves into the air. Lily laughed and tried to catch them, her hat nearly flying off in the wind. Daniel reached out, steadying her with a hand on her shoulder. "Careful," he said. She grinned up at him. "I know. Brave doesn't mean never being scared." He froze for a second, recognizing his own words from the day on the playground. Megan caught his eye over Lily's head, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them. Some things you said to children stayed with them longer than you realized. When they reached the parking lot, Lily clambered into the back seat of Megan's car, clutching her stack of leaves. As Megan started the engine, she glanced at Daniel through the open driver's side window. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For telling her. For not making promises you can't keep." Daniel nodded once. "I meant every word." That night, back in his apartment, Daniel set the large leaf Lily had given him on his desk. Its edges were already curling slightly, the veins delicate against the lamplight. He considered pressing it between the pages of a book, but decided instead to leave it where he could see it every day. A reminder, not of the conversation itself, but of the trust it represented, and the promise he'd made aloud. The Monday after their walk in Woodland Park dawned gray and damp, the kind of Seattle morning where streetlights still glowed at 8 a.m. A fine mist clung to the air, blurring the view through Greenwood Elementary's tall windows. Daniel Cole arrived just before the lunch bell. He hadn't planned on coming, at least not officially, but an early board meeting had ended unexpectedly, and he'd found himself driving north instead of heading back to his office. He carried a small paper bag from a bakery in Fremont, the smell of fresh oatmeal cookies escaping from the top. The front office staff greeted him with the kind of familiarity that comes from seeing someone often enough to stop asking for ID. "Here for lunch duty again?" one of the receptionists teased. "Something like that," Daniel said, smiling as he signed the visitor log. The cafeteria was its usual swirl of sound, trays clattering, the sharp squeal of a chair dragging across the floor, the rise and fall of children's laughter and chatter. But there was something different about where Daniel's eyes landed first. Lily wasn't at the far corner table anymore. She was at the center, surrounded by a group of classmates. Her yellow sweater was bright against the muted tones of the room, her dark hair pulled back in a loose braid. She was laughing at something a boy across from her had said, then unwrapping the sandwich from her lunch tray. Daniel hung back for a moment, watching. It struck him how small a change in geography could mean so much, how the shift from the corner to the center could rewrite an entire chapter of someone's day. He walked over slowly, and as he approached, one of the girls at the table, freckled with a shy smile, nudged Lily. "Your friend's here," she whispered. Lily turned, grinning. "Hi, Uncle Daniel?" The title hit him with a quiet warmth. It wasn't loud or ceremonious, just natural, like it had always been there. "Hi, kiddo," he said, sliding onto the bench beside her. From his seat, he could see the whole table. The children were passing around a bag of baby carrots, swapping halves of sandwiches. In the center sat a smaller boy with messy blonde hair, his lunch tray empty except for an apple. Lily glanced at him, then at her own sandwich. Without hesitation, she split it in half and pushed the larger piece toward him. "Here," she said simply. The boy hesitated. "But—" "It's fine," Lily said. "You can have it." He took it, mumbling a thank you. Daniel's chest tightened, not out of sadness, but something closer to pride. He remembered her words on their first meeting when she'd told him bread was all they had. And here she was, giving half of her lunch away without a second thought. "You didn't have to do that," Daniel murmured to her. She shrugged. "Neither did you." He smiled faintly. "Fair point." As lunch went on, Daniel found himself drawn into the easy rhythm of the table. The kids told him about their science projects, their favorite playground games, the best and worst cafeteria meals. One of them asked if he was a teacher. Another wanted to know if his office building was taller than the Space Needle. When the bell rang, chairs scraped back, and the tide of students flowed toward the exits. Lily lingered, collecting the stray napkins and juice cartons from the table. Daniel stayed to help her. "You know," he said quietly, "you don't have to sit at the center if you don't want to." "I like it here," she said. "It's warmer." He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. After walking her back to class, Daniel stepped outside into the misty air. Megan was waiting near the parking lot, leaning against her car with her hands in her coat pockets. "I hear you've been promoted," she said as he approached. "Promoted?" "To the center table," Megan said with a faint smile. "Lily told me." "She earned that spot herself," Daniel said. "I just made sure she had the chance." Megan tilted her head. "That's more than most people ever do." They ended up at the same little cafe they'd taken Lily to after her playground fall. Daniel bought 2 coffees and they took a table near the window. Outside, the wind had picked up, sending a scatter of red maple leaves skittering across the sidewalk. "She's different these days," Megan said, warming her hands on her cup. "More confident. She talks about school like she belongs there." "She's always belonged," Daniel said. "Sometimes the world just needs reminding." Megan studied him for a long moment. "You're good for her." He met her gaze. "She's good for me." Back at his apartment that evening, Daniel set the bag from the bakery on the kitchen counter. Only 1 oatmeal cookie remained. The rest had been eaten at the center table, passed around in broken halves and quarters until every hand had a piece. He left the last cookie on a plate, not because he planned to eat it, but because it felt like a reminder of something worth keeping in sight. The quiet, unglamorous acts that built a life. Sharing, showing up, sitting beside someone until they didn't need you to anymore. The cherry trees along Greenwood Avenue had begun to bud. Tiny flecks of pink breaking through the Seattle gray. It was the first real sign of spring, and with it came the soft hum of new beginnings, a hum Daniel Cole felt in his bones as he walked up the front steps of Greenwood Elementary. Today wasn't a planned visit. It didn't need to be. He found the cafeteria much as it had been the first day he'd seen it, crowded, noisy, alive with the clatter of trays and the chatter of children. But as his eyes swept the room, he spotted the difference instantly. Lily Anderson wasn't alone in the shadowed corner. She wasn't even just at the center table now, she was the center. Her laugh rang out above the din, warm and unguarded, as she passed a bag of grapes to the boy beside her. Daniel made his way through the tables. A few kids called out greetings. "Hi, Uncle Daniel," and he returned each one with a smile. When he reached Lily's table, she was already pushing her lunch tray toward him. "Here," she said, picking up her sandwich. "You get the bigger half today." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Is this payback?" "It's your turn to share," she said with mock seriousness. He took the sandwich, splitting it evenly again before placing the halves back on the tray. "We'll share it together." They ate side by side, the conversation meandering from her art projects to an upcoming field trip to the Woodland Park Zoo. Every so often, Daniel caught Megan's eyes at the far end of the room. She'd come to help with lunch duty, and there was a quiet exchange there, a kind of understanding that didn't need words. When the bell rang, Lily lingered. She tucked the rest of her grapes into a small container, slid it into her backpack, and then took Daniel's hand. "Walk me out?" she asked. They stepped into the crisp spring air. The playground was wet from an early morning shower, the scent of damp cedar heavy in the breeze. Lily skipped ahead, then stopped suddenly, turning back to face him. "You know," she said, "I think we're kind of the same." Daniel smiled. How's that? We both started at the corner table, she said simply. Now we're not there anymore. For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. He thought about how his own life had been a corner table for years, walled in by work, by distance, by the belief that connections were distractions, and how this small girl, with her bread and water and unshakable kindness, had pulled him into the center without him even noticing. You're right, he said at last, and I think we should stay here for a while. They met Megan at the front steps. She'd taken off her volunteer apron and was tucking it into her bag. Zoo trip next Friday, Lily announced. Can Uncle Daniel come? Megan glanced at Daniel, a faint smile playing at the corner of her mouth. That's up to him. I'll make it work, Daniel said. Wouldn't miss it. That evening, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with Lily's sunflower painting propped against the wall. Outside, the city's lights shimmered on the bay, but his eyes kept returning to the golden petals and the sweep of blue sky behind them. It struck him that sunflowers didn't grow by accident. Someone had to plant them, tend them, make sure they had enough light. But once they did, they turned toward that light on their own. And maybe people weren't so different. The next week, on the morning of the zoo trip, Daniel stood outside the school buses, watching the children line up in bright jackets and backpacks. Lily spotted him and waved wildly, her hat askew. He climbed onto the bus, taking the seat beside her. She handed him a small paper bag. Cookies, she said, for sharing. As the bus pulled away, Daniel glanced around at the sea of faces, laughing, shouting, pressing against the windows to wave at parents on the sidewalk. And he realized that somewhere along the way he'd stopped being just a visitor here. He was part of the picture now. A week later, he returned to Greenwood on a quiet afternoon. The cafeteria was empty, the chairs stacked on tables. He stood for a moment at the far corner, the place where Lily had once sat alone with her bread and water. Then he walked to the center of the room, the space where she sat now, surrounded. He could see it clearly. The distance between those two seats wasn't measured in feet, but in trust. In the slow, steady work of showing up. In the courage it took for a little girl to offer half her sandwich, and for a man to learn how to accept it. Daniel smiled, the sound of children's laughter from the playground drifting in through the open windows. They were both walking forward now. And that's how a seat in the far corner of a noisy elementary school cafeteria turned into the heart of an entirely new family. From bread and water to shared sandwiches, from polite hellos to promises that will last a lifetime, Lily, Megan, and Daniel didn't just change each other's days. They changed the course of each other's lives. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. If you felt even a little bit of the warmth we tried to share, we'd love for you to join our community here. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story that heals, inspires, and reminds us all kindness is never wasted.